I want to say shalom to everyone who's here and online with us. Um, Today we're going to deal with a couple of topics, and not specifically. Normally we hit up we stay on one topic and just break it down. But there was a couple of topics that I wanted to address. Some that have been brought to me as questions that I felt would be it'd be good to bring understanding to everybody on these certain topics. And one of those topics is the whole idea of men with long hair. Uh, so let's look at that. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. It was a concern of a brother with this scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, on if it was okay for men to have long hair. And I figured it was a good question, and I'd like to bring out understanding to everybody on it, besides just him alone. 11, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 14.
1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. Doeth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is shameful unto him? Verse 15. But if a woman having long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering.
Okay. So, verse 14 says, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? Mm-hmm. All right, so reading that without doing too much more detailed research on it, one will be led to believe that it's a shame for a man to have long hair. Mm-hmm. But that brings up a kind of a contradiction, or even it's kind of confusing, because when you look at Solomon, I'm sorry, not Solomon, but Samson, a razor never touched his hair from when he was born, right? So does this scripture here in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians, is it saying that it's a problem to have that a man with long hair is a shameful thing? That's not that's what it says in the translation. But when you go to the Greek, you gain a better understanding of what the scripture is actually saying, because we understand that the Nazarite vow was that the male child would not have a razor put to his head ever, right? And so that's what Samson had done. His mom had vowed a Nazarite vow. Matter of fact, the same thing with John the Baptist in the New Testament. So we have these examples of men with long hair. If they've grown to a full age from a child never having a haircut, they had long hair. Mm-hmm. So let's see what the scripture really means when it's referring to long hair. Here in, yes. A Nazarite vow was a vow that a parent would make to the Most High. They would, it was in a sense, they were giving their child over to the Most High, and in that vow, they promised to that child would never, a razor would never touch his head, that he would never drink strong drink, and even in John the Baptist's situation, it even included a specific diet, like the scripture talks about how he was in the wilderness eating locusts and honey. So he only dealt with, the things that were from in the wilderness. Like, he didn't really necessarily eat meat. He ate insects, locusts. Remember, we had talked about the clean, the creeping things that were clean. We dealt with the law of the clean and unclean things, and locusts is clean for us to eat, even though we today don't deal with insects and locusts like that. But it's still a clean food. So that was the Nazarite vow. And they dedicated their children to the service of the Most High. So we see what a great work Samson did, even though he had his flaws with women. And we see what a great work that John the Baptist did. He was the forerunner for Christ. And they had taken these vows and dedicated themselves to the Most High in this particular way. So in dealing with the long hair, with men having long hair, in verse 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14 and 15, when it says, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? All right, well, those three words, have long hair, are represented by one word in the Greek. And that word is kamao. All right? And what it means is to wear tresses of hair, to have long hair. All right. So when we look at tresses of hair, that in particular refers to a man wearing his hair in a feminine manner. Like when women curl their hair and do certain things to their hair, they do it because they're women, because they're feminine. It's a feminine thing. So it's not referring to a man himself having long hair, like if a brother has dreads or has braids. It's referring to the style of the hair. Yes, sister.
Like
Al Sharpton, James Brown, Snoop Dogg, Cat Williams. That's what it's referring to. Like I said, we know by the account of Samson that this isn't referring to men who have length in their hair and that being a shame because of the Nazarite vow, which prohibited Samson from having long hair. Matter of fact, let's look at the vow that Samson took. Let's go to Judges 13 and 5.
Before Samuel.
Yes, before Samuel.
13 and 5.
Yes, Judges 13, verse 5.
Judges chapter 13, verse 5. For lo, thou shalt not conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. For the child shall be a Nazarite unto the Most High from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines.
Go ahead and start at verse 1, so we'll have some context to the scripture.
Judges chapter 13, verse 1. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Most High. And the Most High delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years.
So this was our MO. Doing evil, going against the law, and then he was send a judge that would bring us back. And that's basically what's being explained here. We went against the law, so he gave us over to the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Go ahead.
Verse 2. And there was a certain man of Zahar, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. Verse 3. And the angels of the Lord appeared unto the woman, and said unto her, Behold, now thou art barren, and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing.
And so, go ahead, read the last scripture.
Verse 5. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto the Most High from the womb.
All right. So here it is. There was a woman of the tribe of Dan who, or there was a certain man from the tribe of Dan uh, who had a wife who was barren. And the angel of the Most High came to her and said, I'm gonna open your womb." All right. And he told her not to drink strong drink, and instructed her. And this woman was the father of Samson. So we see that the vow, the Nazarite vow that she took for him, was that he would not cut his hair. That's just a part of the Nazarite vow. And it said, "And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." And so that's the story of Samson, that he was, the Philistines couldn't figure out how to deal with Samson because he had this strength. And we all know the story of Samson and Delilah, and how his strength was in his hair, and how he revealed to her that a razor had never touched his hair. And she set him up basically, because the Philistines were looking for a way to get to Samson, because they had no way of getting to him because of his strength. It was through a woman. And so it was his poor judgment. I was reading the story of Samson, and like 3 or 4 times prior to him actually telling her what, where his strength was, he told, she came to him and said, "Tell me, if you love me, tell me what makes you strong." And he said, "If you lay new ropes upon me, I'll lose my strength." And she did it. 3 different times he told her something that wasn't true, that would take away his strength. And each time she did it to him, and the Philistines would come against him, and he would rise up and slay them. And she was like, "You lied to me. If you really love me, why would you lie to me?" And so I'm sitting there reading this, and I'm like, all right, he has 3 different examples of her looking for his demise. Why would he tell her the truth and allow himself to be put in a situation to be weakened? But that just goes back to, his fault. You can see the same thing in David. Their fall was a lustful heart after women. And he was dealing with a woman that wasn't even of Israel. So, that's a little off topic of what I want to go, where we're going today, but it's fine, for us to go here just to bring some understanding to it. But Samson had long hair. So back to 1 Corinthians 11, we look at that word where it says, I'll read the scripture again. It says, "Does not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him?" The words "have long hair" are represented by one word in the Greek. And that word in the Greek, again, is kamao, which means to wear tresses of hair. So, what is a tress of hair? It's a long curl, or it's plaited or braided hair. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1. It's a style, it's a feminine style of hair. Sure. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1.
Chapter 3, verse 1. First Peter's chapter 3, verse 1. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husband, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. Verse 2. While they behold your chastening conversation coupled with fear, whose adoring let it not be the outward adorning of plaiting the hair, and of wearing of gold, or putting on of apparel.
Okay, so we're reading a scripture here referring to a woman who is married to a man who is not following the Most High God. It's instructing her how to lead her husband to the Most High. It says in verse 1, be subjected to your husband, even though he's not following the Most High. Be under subjection to him, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. So it's instructing a wife that if you've accepted this man as your husband, and and he hasn't come unto the understanding of the Most High, and he's not beating on you. We're not referring to a man that's abusing his wife. We're referring to a man who is taking care of his wife, but not following the Most High. All right. It says, let her conversation may win him over. And then he says, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear. So this wife would have when she's speaking to her husband, she's not nagging her husband saying, won't you come to Bible study with me? Won't you read the Bible with me? Won't you, she's not at him like that. That's not what wins a man. That repels a man. Even if what the wife is saying is true, that's not what wins her husband over. Now, what will win that husband over is if when he understands that they disagree on this topic of spirituality, that she's still subjective to him, still doing the duties of a wife, making sure that he's taken care of, that the home is taken care of, that when he goes out and comes in from work, that she's cooked for him, and the children are taken care of, the clothes are washed, and all of the duties of a wife. And however that may be set up from home to home, she's doing those things, and she's still under subjection to him, to where he says, babe, I think we should this is the way I think this decision should go. After conversation between the two of them, she respects his decision still. All right. And the conversation that she has is not a nagging conversation. It's a chaste conversation. It's a pleasant conversation. All right. And then it goes on in verse 3, and it says, who's adorning. When it says who's adorning, it's referring to that wife. It says who's adorning, let it not be that outward adorning. So this woman is chaste, and she hasn't dressed herself in a manner that's overly appealing to another man, or that she's so much more worried about her physical appearance. But it says who's adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair. So this is referring back. This is the precept I really wanted to refer to when it says the plaiting of hair. It's talking about how a woman may dress her hair in a particular style. And I'm not saying that this scripture is saying that it's not okay for women to take pleasure in their hair, because as we go back to 1 Corinthians, it shows that a woman's hair is her glory. She should take care of her hair and be interested that her hair looks nice and is well taken care of. But this scripture in particular is just referring to the fact that her outward appearance should not be more consuming than who she is on the inside, especially when dealing with a husband who is not following the Most High. So let's read. It says, whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair and wearing of gold or putting on of apparel. Not to say that any of that is wrong. There's nothing wrong with wearing gold. There's nothing wrong with plaiting hair. There's nothing wrong with putting on of nice apparel. But that should not be the utmost concern of any of us. In particular, in this scripture, is referring to a woman or a wife whose husband is not following the Most High. But it says, let it be the hidden man of the heart in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of the Most High of great price. It says, so instead of making your outward adornment be of such priority, first off, let that inner man be adorned with meekness and a quiet spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's speaking to that wife, which oftentimes is hard for wives and women in general to have that meek and quiet spirit. That goes back to what I was saying when it comes to nagging a husband. That's not how things get done. Even if you need him to cut the grass, that's not how you address your husband, by getting on him and nagging him to cut the grass. What does work, and see, what I've learned is, if in a relationship between husband and wife, if there's something that your spouse you're displeased with, oftentimes you need to look at yourself. If there's a behavior that your spouse is exhibiting that you're displeased with, oftentimes you need to look at yourself. How am I addressing my wife? How am I dealing with my wife? How am I addressing my husband? How am I dealing with my husband? Particularly in this situation, am I nagging my husband to do these things? That tends to lead that husband to not want to do it all the more. However, if you can be meek and quiet with and have a chaste conversation for your husband, then he's going to look at himself and be like, you know what? She's really being loving towards me. She's really doing this, really doing that. How can I please her? And so in this spousal relationship, when we're looking to please our spouse, then ultimately that comes back to us. So if I'm looking to please my wife and she sees that that's a main concern of mine, her heart is going to be lent towards, my husband really loves me. He really takes care of me. He really does this, this, and that. How can I please him? And so if we're seeking to please each other, we're being pleased as well. All right? Understand that we don't seek to please our spouse so much to the point that it causes us not to please the Most High. This is a righteous marriage that I'm talking about. All right? But back to the point. We're talking about how the word that represents have long hair in 1 Corinthians is a Greek word that means tresses of hair, plaiting of hair. And we come here and we see in verse 3 that it's talking about the adornment of a woman's hair being plaited in braids, or plaiting of hair and wearing gold in a certain apparel. So I'm bringing those two precepts together to gain further understanding of the scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, to show that those words are not saying that it's a shame for a man to have long hair, but it's a shame for a man to have hair that looks like a woman's hair. All right. So let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And let's read that in verse 15. Chapter 11, verse 14.
First Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. Doeth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering.
So, back to the point of to say there's nothing wrong with a woman taking care of her hair, because it's given to her as a covering. It should be manicured and well maintained, and a woman takes time to do her hair, but it should not take priority. It should not be priority number one. All right. So the word used here in the Greek in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14, for to have long hair is komao, which refers to ornamental tresses or plaits of hair, which differs from G25 or G2359, which denotes hair from the scalp. And that's in other contexts in the Bible when it's referring to just hair in itself, the word that's there is the Greek number for it is G2359, and that just denotes just straight out normal hair. All right, so that's the difference between those two things, which is why in verse 15 it calls the woman's hair her glory. When sisters get their hair done, they are they're glowing over the glory of their hair. You know, when a woman comes from the beauty shop and got their hair done, you know, they got an extra bounce in their step. They turning their head a little more than they normally do. You know what I'm saying? Just like us brothers, when we get our hair cut, or for us who have dreads, when we get a fresh twist, we feel nice about our hair. But that's even more so for a woman. That's why it's important that, you know, we let a woman know that, you know, your hair looks good, because that's her glory. That's a utmost compliment you can give a woman. All right.
Say we get a haircut and we start walking like George Jefferson.
Got an extra strut in our step. You know, women, they especially have an extra strut. So out of the 15 times that hair is used in the New Testament, it's not used as it is in 1 Corinthians, where we just read, because it's specifically addressing a man who has hair that looks like that's fashioned in the style of a woman. The 15 times that it's used in the New Testament, it's just referring to hair in general. All right, and it's only used twice, like it is in verse 14, referring to a woman, or referring to it being in a feminine manner. When it's has ornaments on it, and it's curled, and it's what is referred to as tressed. Yeah.
So man can't have long hair as long as it ain't in the style of a woman.
As long as it's not in the style of a woman. That's exactly what this scripture is saying. So when you see, you know, pimps, supposedly, you know, they got their hair pressed. You see Snoop Dogg. You see these homosexual men primping their hair in the fashion that a woman should. That's what 1 Corinthians is referring to as shameful. And, you know, it says nature itself tells you that. I didn't have to read this scripture for us to see some man walking down the street with a long pressed out hair and think that it looks shameful. It doesn't take scripture for us to understand that. We can see that and think that without reading the Bible. So that's what that's referring to. The same thing goes for garments that a man might wear. Let's look at Deuteronomy 22:5. And it seemed like, Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5.
Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all that do so are abomination unto the Most High thy power.
And see, these things is what seems to become the fashion of the day. So here we have men, you know, hip hop artists walking around in skirts or kilts, whatever they want to call it. It's a dress. You know, you got Kanye West and A$AP Rocky, Puffy.
Basketball player, the one that played.
He said Rowdy Piper. That's that. And see, when you go to those, he's pulling up on the Irish kilt. Like that's what the heathens do.
Yeah.
That's not, especially us as Israel, we don't do those things. So you got all these people that are influential among Judah and among Israel on stage wearing skirts. They continually bombarding us. Why are they coming after us? Why is Snoop Dogg got the feminine hair? Why is it these comedians are dressing up as women? They are all black. It's all Judah. It's all Israel. You got Martin Lawrence, Big Mama. You got Tyler Perry, Medea. You got I can just go on and on and on. These comedians dressing up like women, and here it is, the Bible saying that that's an abominable thing, having their hair looking like women and dressing as a woman would dress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
About the scripture about when a woman shouldn't wear that's pertaining to a man, that means pants overall, or is it okay for a woman to wear pants like that's made for a woman?
It's okay for a woman to wear pants made for a woman. It's talking about like when we see the examples that we have today is when, let's say you walking down the street and there's a couple in front of you. And you see it's a man and a woman, and the man is dressed, he got on jeans like a man, shirt like a man, and the woman looks like a woman. But then when you pass by that couple and you turn around and you see that man you thought was a man is actually a woman. That's what it's referring to. What it's actually saying is a man should look like a man. A woman should look like a woman. A woman should not look like a man, and a man should not look like a woman.
Because you got some like Israelite camps that be out in the streets talking about the word, and when they come to that scripture on a woman, just because a woman have pants, they attack her about having pants. And I'll be like, my mom be like, well, they are feminine women pants out there.
Right.
I'm wondering, do that apply?
Yes, sis. Well, they're fashioned in a different way. When a man puts on a woman's pants, you can tell that he's wearing women pants. You know what I'm saying? When a woman puts on a man's pants and she got them sagging down, trying to look like a man, you can tell that those are men's pants. What it's really referring to is, ultimately what it's saying is, there should not be mixing of the genders. It shouldn't be a question of, is that a man or is that a woman? Yes. We shouldn't imitate the opposite sex. Right. What is that about? Because who does that? Homosexuals. Which the Most High also says is an abomination. Gay men look like women, dress up like women. Gay women dress up like men. There's a reason. There's a reason that he said not to do these things. Because there's a spirit attached to that when you start trying to look like the opposite sex. All right? Then you start wanting to act like the opposite sex. Then you start wanting to do what the opposite sex does. All right? Let's go to, that's it on that topic. But the brother said, you see these Israelite groups out on the street addressing people, women with pants on. And this is another issue that a lot of Israelite groups have problems with. And it's a man's head or a man's beard. We're going to get clarity on that today. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26. Leviticus 19 and 26. There was a sister who was watching one of our videos, and she was complimentary of the video, but she was like, but why you brothers shave your beard? And so to bring some clarity on that, we're gonna look at these scriptures today. And I don't blame her for that. She just, that's what. Yeah, 1926. She wasn't attacking. She was just curious. Oh yeah. Yeah, we gonna go into it right now.
Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26. Ye shall not eat anything with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe time.
Okay,
go ahead.
Just the context of where we are right now. We're in Leviticus. We all know that Leviticus deals with what? The laws. So this is addressed to Israel, right? All right, so he's telling Israel, ye shall not eat anything with the blood. Neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times. Notice that these things are the things that heathens do. And even when we went into Canaan, before we went into Canaan, the Most High told us not to not to give our sons to the women of Canaan, and not to give our women to the sons of Canaan, because I don't want you to practice the ways of the heathen.
Mm-hmm.
And so even here in verse 26, he's dealing with ye shall not eat anything with blood. Go ahead. Well, it's saying cook your meat.
Mm-hmm.
Like when people talking about, yeah, I like it medium rare, and you cut it open and it's bleeding, and mostly it's Esau who likes their meat that way.
I barbecue for the stadium, and I cooked that prime rib.
They like that prime rib bleeding.
Yeah. Like one time, I'm like, man, I'm gonna just cook this mug all the way through. Boy,
they were mad, huh?
They was mad.
Oh, they were mad.
They was mad at me.
Don't cook that prime rib all the way through. They continue. Because a prime rib is the prime cut of beef.
Right.
They like it rare, and if you overcook it, then they upset about it because you done ruined this prime cut of meat. And that's what Esau was. That's how he was dealing with that when he wanted those lentils of that red lentil soup. It was red. It wasn't done cooking, and that's how he wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
So where we at?
We're at verse 27.
Okay, speaking of the eating of things with blood, let's go to Acts chapter 15, and we're gonna come back to Leviticus. So hold it. Acts 15, verse 19.
Acts chapter 15, verse 19.
Now this is the Council of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this before. Paul has come back to Jerusalem because when he was out ministering to the Gentiles, the Jews tried to condemn him to impose certain things upon the Gentile nations that he was specifically circumcision upon the Gentile nations that were coming into the truth and coming into the understanding of Christ. And so Paul went back to Jerusalem to meet with the disciples of Christ to address how the word will be given to the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. All right. So they're dealing with how to deal with the Gentiles. Go ahead.
Acts chapter 15, verse 19. Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to the Most High.
Okay. And when it's saying trouble not them, he's saying we're not going to impose circumcision on them. That was the issue that was specifically brought up. Mm-hmm. All right. But what will we do? Go ahead.
Verse 20. But that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idol.
Stay away from the idols and the worship of idols. Go ahead.
From fornication.
From fornication, whether it's spiritual or physical. Go ahead.
And from things strangled. And from blood.
And from blood. Mm-hmm. Yes, sister. Well, when I say fornication being a spiritual thing, like the Most High, he divorced us because we had went after idol gods. That's a form of fornication. Mm-hmm. That's spiritual fornication. When you go lusting after idol gods. All right. Mm-hmm. And so we see here, it says, which from among the Gentiles, it says, verse 19, for my sentence is that we trouble not them which are from among the Gentiles, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, because that's what they were doing, mm-hmm. From fornication, mm-hmm. and from things strangled, because that's what they were doing, and from blood, mm-hmm. because they were drinking and eating blood. Let's go back to Leviticus. Leviticus 19 and 26.
Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26.
So we saw that's what the Gentiles were doing. So now when we look in Leviticus, when Moses is dealing with Israel, what does he tell them?
Ye shall not eat anything with the blood.
All right.
Neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times.
All of these things the Gentile nations were doing. So he's basically telling him, don't do what the Gentiles are doing. Continue.
Verse 27. Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard.
All right. So this is the scripture of controversy. Because so many interpret this as meaning ye shall not, when it says ye shall not round the corners of your heads, it's saying you shouldn't, for whatever reason they may say it, you shouldn't shave your head. Or even when it says neither shall thou mar the corners of thy beard, they say you shouldn't shave your beard. Now, true enough, as a way of life and as our culture and as Israelites, they wore beards. But this scripture is not saying that you should not shave your head or that you should not cut your beard. If it was saying that, it would say shave or it would say cut. It doesn't use those words. What words does it use? It says rounding the corners. And it says mar the beard, right? All right. Let's gain understanding on what these words mean and not assume that it means something that it doesn't mean. All right. So we're in the Old Testament, which means that this comes from the Hebrew. So let's look at that word round. And when we look that word up in the Hebrew, it's nakaf. All right. And it's H5362. It says a primitive root to strike with more or less violence, to beat, fail, corrode, by implication of attack, to knock together, that is, surround or circulate, to encompass, about, cut down, destroy, go around, about, enclose, round. But specifically, it means to strike with more or less violence or to attack. All right. So now, let's look at this with that in mind. It says, we shall not strike or attack the corners of your head. What does corners mean? Let's look at that word. All right. Let's go to corners in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, corners is H6285, which is payah. And it means properly mouth in a figurative sense. That is direction, region, extremity, corner, end, quarter, or side. So this word corner refers to a region or a part around the mouth. Okay? So let's read this with the Hebrew understanding. Ye shall not strike the mouth or the region around the mouth of your heads. All right. So it says, let's look at what that word head is. In the Hebrew, head is H7218, which is rasha. And it means an unused root, apparently meaning to shake the head, as most easily shaken, whether literally or figuratively. All right, so if someone was to strike my head in the region of my mouth, would it cause my head to shake? Most likely it would. All right, so what this scripture is saying is, ye shall not violently strike a region of the head, causing it to shake. Now, see, that's a when it's just like when you translate a word or a sentence or a scripture from one language to another. Sometimes it doesn't always translate directly. Right. So what this is basically referring to is for us not to be striking ourselves in the face or in the head for a particular reason. It's going to bring a little more understanding to that. We saw that when we came out of the scripture previous to this one, it was referring to things that the Gentiles did, right? And not to do what the Gentiles do. Same thing with this scripture. It's telling us not to do this because the Gentiles did this. And I'm going to explain in more detail what it was the Gentiles were doing. So we're going to read verse 27 with the understanding of the Hebrew. You shall not strike the region of the mouth, or causing your head to shake. Neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Let's look at mar. Let's see what mar means. When we go to the Hebrew for mar, it's H7843, which means shawakwa, which means to decay. That is causatively to ruin, to batter, to cast off, or to corrupt, or to destroy, destruction, to lose, to mar, to perish, to spill, to spoil, or to waste. So it says, neither shall thou decay or to destroy the corners of thy beard. And we know that corners already is referring to a region of the face or a region around the mouth. And the reason that the scripture is saying not to do these things is because some of us are familiar with movies that are set in ancient times. And oftentimes you'll see especially in the warrior type movies, like, something like Conan the Barbarian, or anything that's set in that kind of a period, you'll see that they have scars on their face, like intentional. Like they've intentionally set scars around the regions of their mouth. And even sometimes we see this even in some of the African cultures of today, they've scarred their faces. That's what this is referring to. It's not referring to cutting a beard. None of those words that I read referred to a razor shaving hair follicles. Yes. Yeah. These things are still being done. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You got the piercings through the cheek, to try to look like dimples. Man, we doing all kind of stuff to ourselves. We're gonna go into that even more too, as far as what Scripture has to say concerning those things. All right. So most of the time, when there is a question concerning Scripture, or you want a further understanding, what it really takes is getting into the Hebrew or the Greek of that word. Most times, that will answer any conflicts. You just have to dig a little deeper. You have to grab your Hebrew and your Greek concordance. All right, and that's simply brought out. To say that means cutting hair or cutting your beard is an assumption, and that's putting something there that's not there. All right.
Like the Nazarenes, they took an oath, where they, let their hair and their beard grow, but after they oath, they cut it.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Good point. After the vow, and matter of fact, Paul took the same vow. And this was something that even if you weren't a Nazarene, you could take a vow to the Most High that you would grow your hair for a certain period of time. And at the end of that vow, you went to the temple and you shaved everything clean cut. You shaved your hair, you shaved your beard as a sacrifice. All right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe a good example is like the football players, they put the stuff to reflect the sun. But,
yeah.
They put it on there and then they like, man, now I really
right. Yeah.
Like
it's a marking. Yeah. Like, what's his name? Played for the Ravens.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah. Mike Tyson got his side of his head scarred up. Ray Lewis. And he put that paint on. It's like he done became something else. And that's what these nations would be doing. They would scar their faces to show how much of a masculine warrior they were in honor of whatever gods it were that they were dealing with. The arm. Oh, when they put fatigue up on their face when they go into war. Exactly. Yep. The frats. And see, all these things are dealing with spirits. Matter of fact, let's read verse 28.
Okay. Verse 28. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Most High.
What's the first thing we want to do when a loved one passes? We want to get a RIP tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
And see, it's one thing to do this without the understanding of Scripture. The Most High blinks in our ignorance. But once we know better, then we do better. And here it is. It's telling, ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Most High, the Lord the Most High. Let's go to Mark 5:1 to precept on this. Mark chapter 5, verse 1.
Mark chapter 5, verse 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. Verse 2. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit.
All right, so this is Christ coming across the sea. When he came out of the sea, a man with what? Unclean spirits. Let's see what this man with unclean spirits does. Go ahead.
Verse 3. Who had his dwellings among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces. Neither could any man tame him.
So this man had the strength to break chains in any kind of way that they would try to subdue him. And it says that he cannot be tamed by any man because he's got these unclean spirits in him, right? Go ahead.
Verse 5. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs crying and cutting himself with stones.
And doing what?
And cutting himself with stones.
And cutting himself with stones. So we see this man who has unclean spirits that are inhabiting his body, and he's sitting here cutting himself. And when we see in verse 28 in Leviticus, it says, ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh. All right, go ahead.
Verse 6. And when he saw Yeshua afar off, he ran and worshipped him, and cried with a loud voice, and said, what have I to do with thee, Yeshua, thou Son of the Most High Power? I adjure thee by the Most High that thou torment me not. For he said unto him, come out of the man, thou unclean spirit.
Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. So, one thing that I notice among people or friends of mine who get a tattoo, that sooner or later they get 2 tattoos. Sooner or later they get 3 tattoos. I've heard many times from people who get tattoos, they say, man, it's like it's addictive. Once you get one, you want to get more. And it's a spirit. You've allowed a spirit, an unclean spirit, to deal with you. And it continues to push you down that path. Now, I'm not saying this to mark anybody who has tattoos. I have a brand. Because I wanted a tattoo when I was too young to get one. So I made up my own tattoo and I branded myself. How silly is that? But when we know better, we do better. When I got my brand, my mom was like, what is wrong with you? Because it's a D. It stands for my first name. She said, what does that stand for? Demon? And she was saying it tongue in cheek, but she was also saying it like, what could possess you to do something so stupid to burn yourself like that? And like in my further understanding of it, and I look back on the situation, I'm like, yeah, it must have been a demon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who gonna sit there and set something on fire to the point that it can burn you and stick it on yourself? It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with tattoos and cutting up your skin. You know, there are some children and, well, teenagers, when they're going through that hard time in their life,
Mm-hmm.
when they may be getting picked on or whatever, you know, they practice cutting themselves with razors. And they say how, you know, it helps them to deal with the emotional pain and the emotional stress, to see themselves bleed. And you'll see these people, and they have all these lines coming up and down their arm. They practicing cutting themselves to deal with life situations.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spirit. All this stuff is our spirits, and we see it being in our society more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
You got all these basketball players and all these athletes, full sleeves of tattoos all up in here on their face and forehead, and you know what I'm saying? You got rappers wearing skirts. You got all of it is just madness, and they keep targeting it towards us, towards Israel, because they know these are methods to allow spirits within us.
Man, I was looking at this video the other day. My nephew showed it to me about these Muslims. Man, these guys they said this gives them power. But they take the sharpest machete that they can find and hit themselves in the back. And they split their back all the way open till they got to walk through and somebody got to hold them together. You know, to hold their back together.
That's crazy.
That's what I said.
You know what? There's sects of
when I say man, his back was
split wide open.
man. I'm telling you, they had to literally walk and hold his back together.
They can't stop until they bust their back open. They gotta keep doing it.
That's crazy.
Man,
Them is spirits. What would possess somebody to split their back open? And yeah, send it to me. And there's in the Catholic Church, there's a sect of priests that whip themselves with the cat of nine tails, you know, to try to imitate what Christ went through, as if that's being pious. They take their shirt off and just dealing with them spirits. Dealing with them spirits. And see, these are, and once you do it, you've opened yourself up to further and even more spirits to deal with you. All right? So, you know, initially, we were talking about the cutting of the beards and all that, so to bring understanding that that's not what this scripture is saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's all right to grow your beard, and it's all right to cut your beard.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, Paul was mistaken for an Egyptian. The Egyptians were clean shaven. All right? Moses, he lived as an Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
He was clean shaven.
So Joseph.
Joseph as well. All right, let's go. Okay, I think that's all I have concerning a lesson for today.